Before my father died, he grabbed my wrist with a strength that shouldn't have been possible for a man who had already lost almost everything. His lips trembled as the heart monitor screamed beside him, "Don't trust your mother." Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was gone before I could even ask why. For 3 days, those 4 words echoed louder than every condolence, every funeral hymn, every embrace from relatives who claimed they understood my pain. They followed me through the funeral home, into my childhood bedroom, and into every memory I thought I knew by heart. Because if there was one person I had trusted my entire life, it was my mother. And yet, my father had died trying to warn me about her. I was 32 years old when my world split into 2 versions. There was life before my father's final sentence and everything after it. Until that moment, my family had been painfully ordinary. My father, Daniel Carter, had spent 38 years teaching high school history in a small Ohio town. He was the kind of man who repaired neighbors' fences without being asked, remembered every birthday, and never ended a phone call without saying, "Love you, kid." My mother, Margaret, worked part-time at the local library. Quiet, patient, endlessly organized, she somehow managed to make every holiday feel magical without ever drawing attention to herself. If you had asked anyone in town about them, they would have described them as the perfect couple, married for 36 years, never divorced, never separated, never even rumored to fight. At least not where anyone could hear. Growing up, I honestly believed relationships were supposed to look like theirs. Dad made pancakes every Saturday morning. Mom always corrected his measurements because he insisted on guessing instead of using measuring cups. He laughed. She rolled her eyes. Then they danced in the kitchen while old vinyl records played. It felt impossible that anything dark could exist beneath those memories, which is exactly why his dying words refused to make sense. The funeral passed in a blur of black suits, casseroles, and awkward conversations. People told me my father had been a remarkable man. They told me he had loved his family. They told me time would heal everything. Nobody knew that every sentence I heard was competing against the only one I actually wanted explained. "Don't trust your mother." I watched Mom through the entire service. She cried. She thanked every guest personally. She comforted my younger sister Emily when she broke down near the graveside. Nothing looked fake. Nothing looked suspicious. If anything, she appeared completely devastated. And yet every time she wiped another tear from her face, I caught myself wondering whether my father had wanted me to notice something hiding underneath. That thought filled me with guilt. She had just lost her husband. What kind of son immediately starts doubting his own mother? After everyone left, Emily hugged Mom tightly before driving back to Chicago. "I'll come next weekend," she promised. Mom forced a smile. "I'll be all right." But the moment Emily disappeared down the driveway, the smile vanished. Not dramatically, not suspiciously, just instantly. Like someone switching off a light. I noticed because I was standing in the kitchen pretending to wash coffee mugs. For several seconds, she simply stared through the living room window toward Dad's empty workshop. Her face wasn't sad anymore. It was thoughtful, calculating. Then she noticed me watching. The sadness returned so naturally, I questioned whether I'd imagined the change entirely. "Can you help me sort through your father's office tomorrow?" she asked softly. "Sure. I think it's time." Time. The word felt strange. Dad had been buried barely 4 hours. Already she wanted to organize his belongings. I reminded myself everyone grieves differently. Still, something felt off. That night, I stayed in my childhood bedroom. Sleep never came. Instead, I wandered downstairs around 2 in the morning for a glass of water. The house was silent until I heard voices. I froze. Someone was talking in my father's office. One voice belonged to Mom. The other belonged to a man. My heart began pounding. She wasn't speaking loudly enough for me to understand every sentence, but I recognized the calm, measured tone she always used when discussing something important. Curiosity overcame common sense. I stepped closer. "He can't know yet," she whispered. The man answered too quietly for me to hear. I said, "Not yet." Silence, then footsteps. I hurried back toward the stairs before either of them could see me. From the hallway upstairs, I watched through the railing. A tall man wearing a dark coat emerged from Dad's office. Gray hair, expensive shoes, late 60s maybe. Definitely not someone I'd ever seen before. Mom walked him to the front door. Instead of hugging him goodbye, she handed him a thick manila envelope. He slipped it inside his coat without saying another word. Then he left. Mom locked the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes. She looked exhausted, not guilty, not relieved, just burdened. I stayed hidden until she went upstairs. The next morning, I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed everything. Maybe the man had been Dad's attorney. Maybe paperwork needed signatures. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But breakfast changed that. Mom poured coffee without looking at me. "I'd like you to leave your father's office alone until next week." I nearly dropped my mug. Yesterday, she'd wanted me to help clean it immediately. Now, suddenly, she didn't. "Why? There are financial papers. I can help." "I'd rather you didn't." She smiled gently. The conversation ended, except it didn't end inside my head. Why had she changed her mind overnight? Who was the man? What had been inside the envelope? Most importantly, what couldn't I know yet? After breakfast, Mom drove into town to meet the funeral director. At least that's what she told me. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I walked straight to Dad's office. For the first time in my life, I ignored something my mother had asked me not to do. The room smelled exactly like him. Leather, coffee, old books, a faded globe still sat beside his desk. Stacks of handwritten lesson plans filled the shelves. His reading glasses rested exactly where he'd left them before going to the hospital. For several minutes, I simply stood there, overwhelmed by the feeling that he might walk through the door at any second. Then I remembered why I'd come: the desk. Every drawer was perfectly organized. Bills, tax returns, insurance policies, nothing unusual. Until I reached the bottom drawer. It was locked. I frowned. Dad had never locked anything from us, not once. I searched the desk for a key. Nothing. Then I noticed something strange. Tiny scratch marks surrounded the lock. Fresh scratches, as if someone had recently tried opening it without the key. My stomach tightened. Had Mom tried, or someone else? I knelt for a closer look. That's when I noticed a folded piece of paper wedged beneath the back corner of the desk. It looked like it had slipped there accidentally. I reached underneath and pulled it free. It wasn't a letter, it wasn't a bill, it was a photograph. An old photograph. The edges had yellowed with age. In the picture, my father stood beside a young woman I had never seen before. They looked to be in their 20s. She was smiling at the camera. Dad wasn't. He looked terrified. Across the bottom, written in faded blue ink, were 6 words that made my blood run cold. "She can never find out. Promise me." I turned the photo over, hoping for a date. Instead, I found only one handwritten initial. M. Not Margaret. The handwriting wasn't my mother's, and suddenly my father's final warning no longer sounded impossible. It sounded like the beginning of a secret that had been buried for decades. I stared at the photograph until my fingers began to shake. My father looked no older than 25. His dark hair was thicker, his face clean-shaven, but there was no mistaking him. Standing beside him was a beautiful young woman with auburn hair and bright green eyes. She smiled confidently into the camera, one hand resting lightly on his arm. Dad wasn't smiling. He looked like a man posing because someone had forced him to. But it wasn't his expression that haunted me. It was the handwritten message. She can never find out, promise me, and the single initial. M. Not Mom's handwriting. Someone else. Someone who had clearly known my father long before I was born. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around so quickly that the photograph nearly slipped from my hands. My mother stood in the doorway. She hadn't made a sound entering the house. Her eyes went directly to the picture. For one brief second, every trace of color disappeared from her face. Then, almost magically, she recovered. "What are you doing in here?" she asked calmly. I forced myself to breathe normally. "I was just looking around. I asked you not to." "I know." Her eyes remained fixed on the photograph. "Where did you find that?" "It was under the desk." She walked toward me slowly, not angry, not frightened, just careful. "May I see it?" I hesitated. The hesitation lasted only 2 seconds, but she noticed. Parents always notice. "You don't trust me?" she asked quietly. The question hit harder than I expected. 48 hours earlier, I would have handed it over without thinking. Now my father's dying whisper echoed in my head, "Don't trust your mother." I finally gave her the photograph. She studied it for several long seconds. Then she sighed. "I wondered where this had gone." "You've seen it before?" "Years ago." "Who is she?" Mom looked out the window instead of answering. "Her name was Melissa." My heart skipped. Another M. Was she Dad's girlfriend? No. Then who? She folded the photograph carefully. A mistake. The answer was too short, too rehearsed. "What does that mean?" "It means your father knew her before we met. And that's all." She tried placing the picture into her sweater pocket. Without thinking, I reached for it. "No." She looked surprised. "I think Dad wanted me to see that." "What makes you think that?" "He told me not to trust you." The words hung between us like shattered glass. For the first time in my entire life, my mother looked genuinely hurt. Not defensive, not angry, hurt. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly. "So he really said it. You knew?" "No. But you weren't surprised." She looked down at the floor. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That someday this would happen." Another incomplete answer. Another door slammed shut before I could reach it. I was beginning to understand why Dad had loved teaching history. The truth wasn't hidden in one event. It was buried beneath dozens of small decisions. Mom handed the photograph back. "If you want answers," she paused, "don't start with me." Before I could stop her, she walked away. That sentence stayed with me. Don't start with me. She hadn't denied anything. She hadn't defended herself. She hadn't even asked me to forget Dad's final words. It almost sounded as if she wanted me to investigate, unless that was exactly what she wanted me to think. An hour later, I searched every box in Dad's office. Old report cards, vacation photos, medical bills, nothing connected to Melissa. Nothing except one small leather notebook hidden inside a dictionary. It wasn't a diary. Dad had never been the journaling type. Instead, every page contained names, dozens of names, former students, neighbors, people from church. Most had check marks beside them. Some had dates. Only 3 names were circled. One of them belonged to a man I'd never heard of, Richard Lawson. The second read simply, Melissa Harper. The third made my stomach tighten. Margaret Carter, my own mother. Why would Dad circle her name? The notebook contained no explanation, just names, dates, tiny symbols. It looked almost like someone keeping track of unfinished business. Then a folded business card slipped from between the pages. Richard Lawson, attorney at law, the same gray-haired man I'd seen leaving our house the previous night. So he wasn't a stranger after all. He was a lawyer. But why had Dad hidden his card? Why had Mom met with him in secret? And why hadn't she simply told me? That evening, Emily called from Chicago. "How's Mom?" "Tired. And you?" I laughed bitterly. I found something. I told her about the photograph, the notebook, the mysterious lawyer, everything except Dad's last words. Somehow I couldn't bring myself to repeat them aloud. Emily stayed silent for several seconds. "You know, Dad had a life before Mom." "I know. So maybe Melissa was just someone he dated." "Then why write, 'She can never find out'?" Emily sighed. "I don't know. Would Dad keep secrets?" "No." Her answer came instantly, then she corrected herself. "Actually, maybe one." "What?" "Remember when we were kids and he disappeared every November for one day?" I frowned. I had forgotten. Every year Dad claimed he was attending a teacher's conference. He always came home exhausted. Mom never went with him. Do you think he lied? I don't know. But I remember asking Mom once where he really went. What did she say? Emily hesitated. She said some promises are heavier than marriages. The sentence sent chills through me. What does that even mean? I was 8. Why didn't you ever tell me? I forgot. Had she really forgotten? Or had the memory only returned now? Another question, another loose thread. The following morning, I drove to Richard Lawson's office. It occupied the second floor of an old brick building downtown. His receptionist smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. I'm afraid Mr. Lawson is very busy." Before I could answer, the office door opened. Lawson recognized me immediately. "Jacob Carter." He sounded almost disappointed. I wondered how long it would take. He expected me. That alone made my pulse quicken. "You knew my father for over 40 years. I need answers." So did Daniel. He invited me inside. His office smelled of cedar and old paper. Framed legal certificates covered the walls. On one shelf sat a photograph. Dad, Lawson, and another man. All three appeared to be in their 20s. Friends. Real friends. "You were close. The closest." "Then tell me who Melissa Harper was." Lawson's expression changed instantly. "I'm afraid I can't." "You can't, or you won't?" "I made a promise. My father is dead. My promise isn't." Frustration boiled inside me. My father died telling me not to trust my mother. Lawson closed his eyes. For several long seconds he didn't speak. When he finally looked at me again, he seemed 20 years older. So he finally said it. "You knew?" I hoped he never would. "What does it mean?" Lawson walked toward the window. Outside, rain had begun falling over the town. "I can answer one question." "Only one?" "Only one." I didn't hesitate. "Is my mother dangerous?" He smiled sadly. "No." Relief washed over me for exactly 3 seconds. Then he added, "She's protecting someone." The room suddenly felt colder. "Who?" "I've already answered your one question." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words: "For Jacob, if necessary." My breathing stopped. Lawson didn't hand it to me. Instead, he placed it back inside the drawer. "Your father instructed me not to give you this unless someone else found the truth first." "What truth?" "I can't tell you." "Please. I'm sorry." I slammed my hand against the desk. My entire family is built on secrets. Lawson looked directly into my eyes. "No, Jacob." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Your family was built to survive them." Before I could ask another question, his secretary knocked urgently on the office door. "Mr. Lawson." She looked pale. "There's a woman here." "Who?" "Your wife." Lawson frowned. I don't have a wife. The secretary swallowed hard. I mean, Jacob's mother. Every muscle in my body tightened. How did she know I was here? And more importantly, why had she arrived before I even left the office? My mother stood silently in the doorway of Richard Lawson's office. She wasn't angry. She wasn't panicked. She simply looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from sleepless nights, the kind that comes from carrying the same burden for decades. Lawson looked from her to me and quietly dismissed his secretary. Within seconds, the three of us were alone. Nobody spoke. Finally, Mom broke the silence. You found the photograph. I did. And the notebook. Yes. She nodded slowly. I suppose this day was always coming. I couldn't hold back anymore. My father died telling me not to trust you. She closed her eyes. I know. No, you don't know. I thought you lied to him. I thought you betrayed him. I thought maybe you even wanted him dead. She didn't react with outrage. Instead, tears rolled silently down her face. I know exactly what you thought. That answer only made me angrier. Then tell me the truth. Lawson opened the drawer and removed the sealed envelope. He placed it gently on the desk. This is why Daniel left instructions. He looked at my mother. It's time. For a long moment, she stared at the envelope. Then, with trembling hands, she nodded. Lawson slid it toward me. This was written 6 months before your father died. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first sentence made my heart stop. Jacob, if you're reading this, I failed. I swallowed hard and continued. I wanted to tell you everything myself, but I was too much of a coward. If these words have reached you, it means I died before finding the courage. The room disappeared around me. Only Dad's handwriting remained. The woman in the photograph was Melissa Harper. She was never my lover. She was my younger sister. I looked up in disbelief. What? Mom quietly wiped away another tear. Lawson nodded. Keep reading. My eyes returned to the page. Our father abandoned Melissa and me when we were children. We were separated in foster care and spent years trying to find each other. By the time I did, Melissa had become involved with dangerous people because she had nowhere else to go. My breathing became uneven. She wasn't a criminal. She was trying to survive, but one terrible decision connected her to men who never let people leave. Vida Disio, Gramenaf Olgiam Droannesk. I remembered Dad's frightened expression in the photograph. Suddenly, it made sense. He hadn't been hiding an affair, he had been protecting someone. The letter continued. One night, Melissa witnessed a murder committed by members of that organization. They gave her 2 choices: stay silent forever, or disappear forever. Anminamas, is paibind, omsangnit simi pandem, latiramadaunampaun. She nodded faintly. I knew. You knew all along? I met your father after it happened. I kept reading. Margaret married a man who was already carrying a secret capable of destroying multiple lives. She had every reason to leave. Instead, she chose to carry it with me. Tears blurred the ink. Melissa entered witness protection under another identity. Legally, she stopped existing. So, she's alive? I whispered. Lawson answered quietly. As far as we know. Dad's letter continued. If anyone discovered where Melissa went, the people she testified against would eventually find her. Even after decades, some of them were still alive. Everything I believed was collapsing. The secret had never been about betrayal. It had been about protection. Then I reached the sentence that explained everything. The day you were born, I promised your mother that our children would never carry my burden. She kept that promise better than I ever did. I looked at Mom. You protected me. She smiled sadly. I protected all of you. But why tell me not to trust you? Her shoulders dropped. I begged him to. What? I knew he was dying. The room fell silent. I knew you'd ask questions after he was gone. I stared at her. I told him, if he warned you not to trust me, you'd investigate me. I couldn't speak. You'd blame me. More tears. You'd spend your energy looking at me instead of looking for Melissa. My mind refused to process what I had just heard. You wanted me to hate you? If that's what kept your aunt alive? Yes. Everything inside me broke. For days I had questioned every smile my mother had ever given me. Every bedtime story, every birthday, every hug. She had allowed it, knowingly, because the alternative was risking someone else's life. I covered my face with both hands. I'm so sorry. She crossed the room and hugged me. For the first time since Dad died, I cried like a child. Weeks passed before life became even remotely normal. Emily learned the truth. She cried for nearly an hour after reading Dad's letter. None of us blamed him anymore. Instead, we mourned the weight he'd carried alone for 40 years. Richard Lawson helped us settle the estate. Before leaving, he handed me one final envelope. No secrets this time. Inside was another photograph. The same picture, but unfolded completely. The original had been cropped. Standing beside Dad and Melissa was my mother. All three of them were smiling. On the back, written in my mother's handwriting, were 8 simple words. No matter what happens, we protect family together. I realized then why Dad had looked frightened. Not because of Melissa, because the photograph had been taken the day before she disappeared forever. The fear wasn't guilt, it was grief. 3 months later, I received an anonymous postcard. No return address, no signature, only a picture of the Pacific Ocean at sunset. On the back were 7 handwritten words. Thank you for keeping your father's promise. Nothing else, no name, no explanation. I smiled through tears. Some mysteries don't need solving, some only need protecting. I burned the postcard exactly as Dad would have wanted. Not because I feared the truth anymore, but because I finally understood what it cost to keep someone alive. A year later, I visited Dad's grave alone. I placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. I was wrong about her, I whispered. The wind moved gently through the trees. I should have trusted Mom. Then I smiled. No, I should have trusted both of you. For the first time since his death, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful, because I finally understood his last words. He hadn't been telling me that my mother was evil. He had been giving her one final chance to do what she'd spent 36 years doing best. Protect our family. Even if it meant sacrificing her own son's love. As I walked away from the cemetery, I realized something my father had never been able to say aloud. The strongest people aren't always the ones who fight. Sometimes they're the ones willing to be misunderstood forever by the people they love most. If this story made you think, share your opinion in the comments. If someone you loved kept a painful secret for decades to protect another person's life, could you forgive them for lying to you? Or would the broken trust always matter more? To always matter more? To always matter more? To always matter